Hello, everyone. My name is the Galactic Elk, and hope you guys are enjoying these kind of commentaries. I've got a lot of stuff on my mind recently, and I've thought, instead of just thinking about it, why don't I actually talk about it and share my ideas with the world, so to speak. And so this episode is inspired by a documentary that I listened to called A History of Violence by CBS. It features psychologist Jordan B. Peterson, where he does a speech about violence and about why people do violent things. And one of the things that speech led me to think about was the famous quote in Star Wars. Yeah, I know. I'm a weirdo like that. But, I've been listening to Jordan B. Peterson a lot. And one of the things that he talks about is archetypes and how the stories we tell say something about us. And I mean, it's things that I'd always thought about and thought, maybe this is true, but Jordan B. Peterson comes along and basically establishes for me that this is not a completely unpopular only, or a notion that is subject to small, tiny groups of people, but that this is a notion that is popular. Carl Jung was a psychologist who believed in the power of human archetypes and things like that. So, I know it sounds weird to analyze Star Wars, but that's what we're going to do. Or that's what I'm going to do. You can choose to join me or not. So the famous quote is, "Fear is the path to the dark side. Fear leads to anger. Anger leads to hate. Hate leads to suffering." I always thought that quote was kind of weird. I always thought that was a quote that was subject to Star Wars. That's kind of one of those things that's part of a universe and only part of that universe. For example, midichlorians are an example of something that are part of Star Wars and are not in any way obvious. That's obvious to me. There's not a parallel in reality to midichlorians. The Force is another thing. You could say the Force is a transcendent divine force, but it's not really divine. It doesn't really appear to be sentient necessarily. The Force is confusing, and there's not an easy parallel for the Force to reality. And I want to assume that's on purpose. But I thought that this was a quote that is fear's path to the dark side. Fear leads to anger, anger leads to hate, hate leads to suffering. I just thought that was a general quote. I didn't think, and I always thought that was kind of deterministic. That, fear. If you have fear, it leads to anger. If you have anger, it leads to hate. If you have hate, it leads to suffering. I never took the time to really sit back and think about the quote and if it could be understood in connection to our world, to reality, to the truth. And this documentary caused me to think about this quote in terms of, well, how does it apply to our lives and to reality? And so let's break it down. Fear is the path to the dark side. If you read the Star Wars books, I've read Episode 1, Episode 2, Episode 3, and Episode 5. I know it's weird. I haven't read Episode 4 or 6, but I have read Star Wars books. I'm sure there are people out there who've read every single one of them. I am not one of those individuals. But in the books, especially in Episodes 2 and 3, so the prequel books emphasize the role of fear in the Senate, the Republican Senate, and how that fear strengthens the power of the dark side. I'm not sure where I want to go with this. So, fear is the path to the dark side. So fear is a natural emotion. There's nothing wrong with fear. In fact, if we didn't fear, we'd be dead a lot easier and quicker than normally happens. There's a psychological disease called mania, which is characterized by an abundance of positive emotions, an abundance of, happiness, and these are people who will take excessive risks and do very stupid things because they don't have any negative emotions like stress, for example, holding them back, keeping them from doing something stupid. So, for example, if you were about to cliff dive into a pool of water, your body is going, yo, How deep is that? How high are we? Are you really about to jump over this edge? That could kill us. And then the positive side of you is going, yeah, but that rush though. And you make a deliberation. Now, if all you had was negative emotions, you'd never even look over the cliff. Don't even look over the cliff, you might fall. If all you had was positive emotions. So fear is important. But what does Yoda mean when he says fear? Does he mean a healthy respect for something? I don't think that's the case. Scared. Being scared of something. Fear is the path to the dark side. When you are afraid of something, it strengthens the dark side. If you are facing something and you are afraid of it, it has a leg up. It has a win over you. Anything. You come across a random dog. If you're afraid of it, dogs smell fear. Anything. If you're scared of a hurricane. Now, again, but fear, and fear leads to anger. Well, how does that work? Well, you're scared. Let's say you're scared of being alone for the rest of your life. You're scared of basically growing up, growing old, living alone, living without anything. And that scares you. And that leads you to be angry. Angry with yourself, angry with the world for not, looking past yourself. And it leads you, and that leads to hate because I would almost say that's resentment. Again, we look at Anakin. He was scared he was going to lose his mom, which led him to be angry with himself and with his master, which led him to resentment. Then he did lose his mom, which only intensified the anger and the hatred, resentment, right? Because everybody in his life that he had been angry towards, he suddenly hated and resented because they're the ones who killed his mom. Then Padme dies, that only increases his anger and resentment. And that's very much what Dylan, one of the Columbine high school shooters, had, was resentment. He was bitter, very nihilistic. Basically, the Columbine high school shooters, as Jordan Peterson explains, came to the conclusion that life wasn't worth living, and that, it's, life is not just suffering, but it's unimaginable suffering. It's suffering that's not worth bearing, and so we're going to do whatever we can to alleviate the suffering, and, that's why they shot up the school. Because they determined that life wasn't worth living, and all these people who were happy were making them miserable by their mere existence. And that, it's like, if life isn't worth living, who cares if you shoot up a school? If life isn't worth living, you might as well. And that's the problem, is resentment. Here's a quote from the Columbine high school shooters. I think this was Dylan. Moral is just another word. That's it. I think we are all a waste of natural resources and should be killed off since humans have the ability to choose, and I'm human. I think I will choose to kill and damage as much as nature allows me. So take that. Eat napalm and lead. Someone's bound to say, what were they thinking when we go natural born killers, or when we're planning it? So this is what I'm thinking. I have a goal to destroy as much as possible, so I must not be sidetracked by my feelings of sympathy, mercy, or any of that. Keep this in mind. I want to burn the world. Sound familiar? It's the Joker. There was somebody on Instagram who has since been deleted, and thus their posts have faded into the aether, who posted a video of the Joker laughing, and the caption read something like, when you become a nihilist and realize that life has absolutely no meaning and there is no morals and humans serve no purpose. And that really, to me, I was like, wow, that's what the Joker is. The Joker is the extreme nihilist. He's so nihilistic, it's almost as if he can't even live for his own pleasure. I saw it today. There's a comic frame of the Joker and Harley Quinn says, "I know why Batman won't kill you. I finally know why he won't kill you. It's because he'll just give you what you want." I don't think that's a solid theory, but I think it's sort of, the Joker's the ultimate nihilist. He's the ultimate nihilist. He's rejected morality. He's almost rejected pleasure insofar as he can. He has. I mean, what's his meaning in life? Well, his meaning in life is to kill and to destroy and to be so nonchalant about it, to not even, it's almost like he can't even take pleasure in other people's suffering. He almost takes pleasure in his own suffering, as evidenced by several scenes in comics, movies, video games, and TV shows where he's laughing while he gets beaten up. There's a TV show where I think he laughs as he dies. Isn't that right? I mean, the ultimate nihilist, because he had nothing but hatred for the human race. So much so that it's almost like but he's not even pure rage. He laughs because the only pleasure that he can manage to squeeze out of this life he has created for himself is in watching other people suffer. Dare we say suffer as much as he has suffered. Make no mistake, the Columbine high school shooters were mentally ill, mentally deranged, mentally disturbed. And it was more than just bullying that led them to where they were. Jordan Peterson thinks that's an absolutely stupid conclusion to come to. And I'm inclined to agree, because millions of people get bullied all the time. None of them go and shoot up a school. It's really a result of, well, I mean, it's a very nuanced issue, but it's fear, to anger, to hate, to suffering. And the interesting thing is, I always thought the hate leads to suffering, is that you will suffer. But really, if you also think about it, that could very easily mean that hate leads to suffering, to a state of suffering for those around you, that when you are resentful of the world around you, that it leads to suffering for everybody, for others, not just you. The fear is the path to the dark side. I always thought it was a progression, right? Again, I always thought it was very deterministic, and thus I didn't give it any real-world reality type of credence. But it turns out that it actually might be the case that it's more of a progression, but less of a deterministic progression. Fear leads to anger, and anger leads to hate. So what's the cure? Don't get angry. Don't be fearful. I ultimately think, don't be a victim. You look at people all around, everybody, it's like there are some people who they're looking for reasons to be victims. It's like you should be looking for reasons not to be a victim. You should be looking for reasons to not be that way. Don't be a victim. Don't be that way. Overcome as best you can the evil that is within you. I want to leave you guys with a quote by Alexander Solzhenitsyn. He was one of the guys under communist government. He wrote The Gulag Archipelago, a huge novel, which you can buy the abridged version if you're so inclined. Basically, the whole book deals with issues of socialism, and ultimately he is credited. He is credited as one of the people who brought down the Soviet Union. He writes in his book, "If only there were evil people somewhere insidiously committing evil deeds, and it were necessary only to separate them from the rest of us and destroy them. But the line dividing good and evil cuts through the heart of every human being, and who is willing to destroy a piece of his own heart?" So the lesson there is that there's not evil oppressors somewhere over there, but that the potential for an evil nihilistic oppressor rests within you. It's a very dangerous, destructive thought. Take that knowledge and go find the truth. Repair the fissure within your own soul. I'll go ahead and make the call to action here. I mean, I'm a Christian. I'll tell you how to remove the fissures from your own soul. It's not a popular message here on YouTube. It's not a popular message here on the internet. The internet is more and more increasingly a seemingly Christian-free space. Is that because we're being forced out? No, I think it's because many Christians have left. They've excused themselves from the discussion, largely because many Christians tried to debate atheists. Atheists came at us strongly and powerfully, and I wouldn't necessarily say refuted. Well, many Christians made silly arguments, and atheists had a good old time destroying and demolishing those arguments into millions of pieces, and so now Christians are just largely not there anymore, and the Christians that are there just aren't It just doesn't feel like they're as vocal as they used to be, or it's a thing anymore. Maybe the atheists gave us the only publicity we had, and then they tore us all to pieces and threw us in the trash, and now we're whatever. As a Christian, I think that the proper way to repair the fissure within your own soul is to give yourself to God. Acts 2:38 and all that. Because I think, I wanted to conclude with that Alexander Solzhenitsyn quote, but I just really it almost felt unethical to end a discussion of avoiding evil, avoiding nihilism and resentment, to end that discussion with, okay, go find truth. Bye. I didn't feel good hitting the stop button. So, Christian message bothers you, well, largely get over it. I mean, you probably haven't heard a Christian message in years anyway, because you can find all the atheist and secular messages you want in universities, high schools, lectures, YouTube videos, and all that jazz, but it's really hard to find Christian intellectuals and lecturers these days. There are very few of them left. So, that's that. Want to leave it there. Hope you guys enjoyed the video analyzing a Star Wars quote and then diving into, hey, we're all nihilistic in some way, shape, or form, and then trying to turn that around and make it positive. I apologize. Didn't want to go so down into the depths, but that kind of stuff happens when you're thinking about nihilism. Trust me. It's quite a ride. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Hopefully the next video that I do will be a little bit more upbeat, but hopefully just as, if not more, informative than this one.